Welcome, everybody, to Leave It at the Table. I'm Kyle Wright, sitting across from my good friend Drew Gorman. Drew,
what it do, baby?
it's Deadpool week.
Hey, I'm excited.
Yeah?
I can't wait.
You're seeing it Saturday in some capacity.
In some capacity, could be with my boss and my coworker. Could be with you. Could be with my father-in-law. I might see it 3 times on Saturday. Start at 9 a.m. and just let it roll.
Well, I hope it's the kind of movie that'll be good enough to see 3 times over. And
anything with Ryan Reynolds is good enough to see 3 times over.
That's absolutely fair. Drew, we're going to introduce our guests here. First of all, we got returning guest to the show, Miss Tina Fisher. I'm just going to have to refer to you as Miss Fisher here tonight, Mrs. Fisher.
Yes, Miss Fisher.
She got the cup ready for tonight. And, of course, first time to the show. Not supposed to be first time. We're taking it easy on you tonight.
That's fair.
But not supposed to be first time. For first time, it's supposed to be Hot Ones Challenge. Mr. Brian Bassett, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And, yeah, you definitely owe me the Hot Ones Challenge.
We're good.
Sure.
We're going to get there.
On that.
Most definitely.
So if we're going to do Miss Fisher, it should be Mr. Bassett.
Mr.
Right?
Bassett. Mr. Bassett. DB Bassett out there for all you local music enthusiasts.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Really good, too.
So the purpose of today's episode is we're going to do... Drew and I are going to interview you guys, essentially, because you're both educators here in Bay County. You don't necessarily work for Bay County schools, both of you. One of you do, the other one doesn't. But you're both educators here in Bay County. And Drew and I, when we started thinking about different ideas for the show, we were like, hey, we want to talk to different people. We're going to do one with musicians eventually. We want to talk about, working in a restaurant. We're going to talk some wrestling. We've talked sports for the last couple of weeks. So we did the religion episode. Or church episode, rather. So we want to be able to hit on a lot of different fronts. We want to be able to talk about a lot of different things. And I think it's important for people to try to get into the head or the day-to-day routine, I guess you would say, of an educator.
Yeah, and also expounding on that point, we want to hear from a lot of different people.
Yes.
So for the people listening, watching, if you have something that you want to say and you want us to talk about, feel free to give us...
Well, you can't comment.
Can't comment.
So
send us messages. We had some technical difficulties as you were experiencing and seeing. Yeah. But I'll let Kyle talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thanks to a world-renowned local cable company.
World-renowned.
The internet here at the house is down, so no live. Leave it at the table tonight.
Just Owen Wilson's favorite word. Wow.
World of where's the internet?
Yeah. Essentially. So shout out to those guys for just being incredible and making us have to pre-record an episode. So I hope that this finds a lot of people. I know you guys have both kind of told me you're going to share it to some groups, and you both have a lot of friends in the community, and we have our usual.
Yeah, we've got a pretty decent following for being just started up, and we're very appreciative to everyone who has kept up with us. I've spoken about it to a couple people, and they're pretty excited. I was just telling my coworker about it today, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've got some questions for the teachers," because he's a new father and has a daughter coming up, and is kind of hitting that cutoff age of when to get them into school and whatnot. So that'll come up here later, but we'll get it started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're gonna kind of go one at a time, and Jeffrey, while they're talking, we'll just keep the cameras kind of on them. We'll start with you, Tina. What grade do you currently teach? What grades have you taught? And what's your favorite age range to teach? So this is a 4-in-1 question because I also want to know. So let's backtrack. I'm sorry. So the first question, we'll come back to these. I want to know why you decided to become an educator.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to come back to all the other ones, but I think that's an important one to start with.
That's a great.
Man, how do I make a long story short?
You don't have to. That's the beautiful thing. It's pre-recorded.
Gosh, how do I make a long? How do I get into this? I was a mom. I am a mom. My kids are grown. When my youngest was starting kindergarten, first of all, it was important for my husband and I for one of us to be home with the kids at all time. We didn't have that family support, Kyle, that you and Rachel are so blessed to have.
Very blessed. Very blessed.
I mean, my family loved my kids, but they were out trying to do their own thing, and so, we didn't have help with them. So it was important for my husband and I that one of us was with the kids. So I was a stay-at-home mom, and then when my kids started getting older, I thought, well, what's a way that I could make some money but still have the same schedule as the kids? And so I thought, substitute, I'll be a sub. But the problem was, do you know this about me? I didn't have a high school diploma. Did you know this?
I did not.
Yeah, I did not. I dropped out my senior year. Whole nother story. In my senior year in April. So your mom and I, Kyle's mom and I are sisters, and we had gone to high school in Illinois. And when we moved here for our high school, they told us our credits wouldn't transfer, basically. So
that's what happened to me.
Didn't have you too?
Yeah.
So that's when we get into, if we get into Common Core, that's one of the things that I think we need, some kind of common standards throughout the country.
Real quick, tell you the story.
Okay.
Went to freshman year, went to Hiram High School in Georgia. Georgia, absolutely. I'm not afraid. I know we said we're being nice tonight. We're not, like, Georgia's education system needs a lot of reforming and changing. And this goes all the way back to this. I had done my entire freshman year just about. We made it until April or February of freshman year in Hiram High School in Dallas, Georgia. And spent most of my freshman year there. Came down. We moved down here. So a lot of things played into that. We moved down here, and one credit came with me. One credit for my entire freshman year. So the decision was...
When was this?
This was in February of 2007 or 8.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2011. I was supposed to be class of 2010. So we had a decision, my stepsister and I. We really had two different sets of two decisions. The first decision was you just opt out and start back next year fresh, or you opt out or you opt in. You get the credit, the partial credits for the rest of that year, and then you finish. You have to start over. You'll be a freshman the following year, but you'll already have a head start. That being said, the second half of my senior year was a joke. For that reason, I only needed economics. I had 3 electives in economics. Second half of my senior year. So that's a specific story that happened to me. So the other set of two decisions was you do 5 years of high school or you drop out. And luckily I made the right call.
You did the right call. I did not make the right call.
Sorry, back to you.
And my dad was in the military at the time, so he was overseas. My mom got as far as the 7th grade. So in her mind, you got further than me, so, Whereas as a parent now, I would be raising hell up at the school district, raising hell. But I can't blame it all on the school district. It was also me. I did not have good study habits. I was not running with the most influential bunch. So that, coupled with them not taking my credits down here, I just walked out the door from the guidance counselor's office in Rutherford High School in 1988 and never went back.
At what grade did you walk out?
I was a senior year. Yeah.
Wow.
They called me in and they said, these specific credits are not going to transfer. You're going to have to come back and do another year. And I just left. Okay, I just left. So already I was not with the right crowd already. So anyway, long story short.
So you were, your mind was in a place where I'm going to graduate this year, and they're saying you need to do an extra year.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
To make up for credits of classes I'd already taken in another state.
Extra year?
A whole extra year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I mean, it might have been maybe like the second half of the year might have been like half a day kind of thing. But all I heard was, you can't graduate. They were going to let me walk and give me like a blank diploma. But I just left. I didn't feel a part of the school culture anyway, so I left and just lied on my job applications and said that I had graduated and did fine, had jobs. But when it was time to do something when my children were born and I wanted to become a substitute to keep the same hours that my kids had, I had to have a diploma. So I went to Gulf Coast has they did at the time, a wonderful GED prep. We did like a pre-test, and I did great. I just had to work on some math, fractions, decimals.
Yes.
So I boned up on that, took the GED, got a near perfect score, and a lady.
If you don't mind my asking, when was this that you did the GED?
All right, so my son was 5, 4, wait a minute. Okay, so he would have been 2003.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then the lady at Gulf Coast kind of pulled me aside to go over my score, and she's like, hey, you ever consider going to college? And I was like, no, I can't go to college. I'm not, I'm not smart. I can't do this. And she showed me my score, and she said, you did great. I mean, you should. And so it just kind of planted a seed there. our family, we don't have the highest of esteems.
No.
Self-esteem is an issue, and I've worked on my whole life. It's a goal, and I haven't reached it yet, but I didn't think I could. But it just kind of planted a seed. So I became a substitute, right? And then one of my children's teacher got really sick, and she was hospitalized for like a month. So I did a long-term subbing gig in third grade, where I had to. I mean, the other teachers on the team helped me, obviously, with materials and whatnot, but I had to run the classroom for a month while this teacher was in the hospital. And I went home one day and said to my husband, "Wow, I really like this. I think I might could do this." And he said, "Well, why don't you do it?" And I was like, "Okay." So I went to college full time with 3 kids.
Wow. FSU PC.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, first I started at Gulf Coast. Cannot say enough great things about Gulf Coast State College to anybody listening.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I agree with that.
Wonderful. I loved all of my classes there. I learned so much. It was such an awesome opportunity for me. I mean, I remember coming home from my history class a couple times and saying to my husband, "Oh, let me tell you what we talked about today." And he would say, "Where were you in high school?" I learned that in high school. And I would say, "I was asleep, okay." Okay. But I was so excited. It was just wonderful. Anyway, went through Gulf Coast, Florida State, PC, graduated. And yeah, but going way back, all right, before, so I had 3 kids, little kids, stay-at-home mom, worn out, okay, didn't have that family help. And since I was a stay-at-home mom, other people were like, "Hey, can I drop my kids off to your house?" So I had a house full of kids on the regular. And one day I had laundry. It was laundry, it was kids, it was a mess, and I just wasn't in the best frame of mind. And I really felt I think I told you last episode, I can count on one hand how many times I know God has spoken to me. This is one of those times when I was just fretting about all these kids. It just was like, "You're going to work with kids." And I was like, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
No, thank you.
No, thank you." But I knew that, long story short, why? Because I felt a calling and a leading. So yeah, and so I graduated in 2010 and got a job right out the gate, and I'm amazed at the wonderful things God's done, because couldn't have done it without him.
I didn't realize you've been in it that long now.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking we'll get into where and what grades and everything here in just a minute, even though I tried to jump there. But
Yeah, that was a lot in one question.
yeah, it was. But I mean, that is all kind of one question. But Brian, what's your story here?
I started about the same time, and it's funny that you got into it with being a substitute, because that was my experience as well. Teaching was kind of honestly the last thing that I wanted to do, really. I come from a family of educators. I have siblings, my sister-in-law that were teachers. My dad was a 5th grade teacher for 25 years. My mom worked in special education at the middle school that I went to. Excuse me. So I grew up with my mom being at my middle school. And then when I went to college, my dad was at the college I went to. So I thought that the last thing I wanted to do was be out of school, because school was so much of what I grew up with. I just wanted to kind of put it behind me. Yeah. You guys have both mentioned that I was a musician. So when I first went to school, I went to school for music and studied that for a while, but I definitely didn't want to be a music teacher. And a college degree in music doesn't really do a lot
Right.
beyond that. So to be melodramatic, it was honestly 9/11.
You're from the New York.
Yeah, I grew
from New York State.
Yeah, I grew up in New York, and 9/11 happened, and I always loved history. It was like my favorite subject in high school and middle school. I wasn't a great student. I was like a CB student. Not great at math. Didn't do a lot of reading in high school. I was okay at science, but history was something that, like, I had great teachers. I was into it. And so when I was in college and 9/11 happened, it just felt important that history be something that would I don't know. It felt like something that I needed to teach. I didn't sign up for the military. I didn't have the guts to do that. But I felt like, okay, here's this event. Why did it happen? History is something I'm interested in. Because really before that, for me, teaching was something that there's the cliche, like people who can't teach. People who do, and people who can't teach. And my experience in college was a lot of the people who were majoring in education were people who kind of didn't know what they wanted to do. There were a few people who wanted to be teachers. And I was really kind of running away from that, having so much background in my family as educators. It was like the last thing I wanted to do. So after 9/11, I knew I wanted to be a history teacher. And so I got a degree in history, which turned out to be tough because if you don't have a degree in education, it's kind of tough to get certified. Left New York, moved to North Carolina, and North Carolina is where I started subbing.
What part of North Carolina?
Near Raleigh.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived in Raleigh, and
That's where you met Tina, right?
yeah, that's where I met my wife there. Subbed in Raleigh, I don't remember if I subbed in Chapel Hill. I definitely subbed in Durham, which was wild. So did some subbing there and got a taste for it, and it was an interesting job. It was like the most freedom that I felt at any job that I'd had up to that point, which is interesting. We'll come back to that later maybe. So the job market in North Carolina had kind of dried up, and my wife's family lived here in Panama City.
Shout out to Governor Cooper up there.
Up in North Carolina?
Yeah. No politics.
No, I don't. I don't know him. Here's what I learned about politics in North Carolina, actually, as a sidebar. So you mentioned I grew up in New York, so there's a lot of teams up there. Like I think we talked about this, like Mets, Giants, Jets, Yankees, Buffalo Bills. I moved to North Carolina, and it was NC State, UNC, Duke, Wake Forest. So
all within an hour.
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there,
yeah, almost all within like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. I'm not picking.
All those New York teams. It's a friendly kid show where I tell you how I feel about all the New York teams.
Yeah, that's a different show. We can put a pin in that one for later.
So keep rolling there.
Yeah. So I moved here specifically because of the program at Gulf Coast to bring it to what you were saying. Yeah, they had this education prep institute, and it was a fast track program to get your teacher certification, because one of the things that wasn't explained to me, and I guess maybe this is my college advisor, is I thought if I'm going to be a history teacher, I should get a degree in history. Well, no, if you're going to be a teacher, you get a degree in education. So actually by majoring in my field, it made it a longer path to get my certification. So Gulf Coast did an awesome 2-year program to get my certification. And, I started teaching, I guess it was 15 years ago. Yeah.
About the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's not what I saw myself doing. I mean, I didn't, I grew up with older siblings. I didn't really like kids. I didn't see myself working with kids.
They say it's not until you have kids that you realize that you really don't like kids.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's.
Why did I say that?
Well,
no. Kyle Wright,
Kyle
2024.
I definitely did not like kids before I had kids. Like, that's a thing. But when I was subbing, I did like hanging out with kids. They were fun. They were funny. They were wild and kind of out of control. And but it was never boring. It was always interesting. And that, I guess that kind of got me. That was the bait. Got me in the door with subbing. Hey, this is an interesting job.
From from my perspective, hearing you talk about what happened in New York and what when 9/11 happened, what brought you to it. My first thought was it sounded like you had more of the not the call to arms per se. You had more of like the thoughtful mindset of, okay, a country that doesn't learn from the past is doomed to have the same happen again and 100%. Again and again, and you would rather teach today's youth about that so it doesn't continue to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So
that's intuitive, by the way. That's
hey, I got a brain for something.
I'm proud of that man over there.
I got a few brain cells knocking around up there, but let's go ahead and we'll ask another question, and it's the one Kyle started to get at earlier. What grade do you currently teach, and what grades have you previously taught? And on that, a kind of a secondary question on that, what has been your favorite age range to teach?
Okay. So first year out of college, kindergarten, a moment of silence.
Oh my God.
Precious souls.
That's not on my resume.
The worst year of my life.
At my child last year. God bless Miss Patterson.
But that's those people that really stay teaching kindergarten, they love it.
Miss Lippy.
It is their absolute, that's their calling. That's their
ace.
Ministry. I did 1 year, it was horrible. Now, mind you, I was the 9th kindergarten teacher hired. 9th, okay?
Oh my gosh.
9 that
for,
year.
For the one class?
Yes, because
you were their 9th teacher.
The 9th teacher, but mind you, so Hurricane Katrina had happened in 2005. This was 2010. So these were all these Katrina babies, all right? So we had a whole influx of people from Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Wasn't it Louisiana? Yeah,
that's right.
That came here, and Mississippi, I do think, some of them. Anyway, they all have babies, right? So, and at the last minute, like 3 days, 4 days before school, they're like, oh my God, we keep getting all these kids registering for school. And I'm like, okay, yay, I have a job. And then in college, in our education program, we learned that, or they tried to teach me that some children never see a book. They never hear the ABCs. And I thought, no, that can't be right. It's right. So I got those kids, with the exception of a couple. I got those kids whose parents just, I don't want to be rude or disrespectful, just kind of, kicked that can down the road and didn't register their kid to the literal last minute. Didn't know how to hold a book. It was upside down. Didn't know their ABCs. Didn't know Sesame Street. It was a rough bunch. It was a rough year. So kindergarten 1 year, and then
saw them LSU fans.
God love them. Blessed be the primary grade teachers. Let me tell y'all what. Having done elementary and middle school now, elementary is harder, hands down. Hands down harder. But anyway, so I did kindergarten, and then at the end of the year, I was not invited back. Okay, they're like, no, Miss Fisher, thank you. Have a great life. I was not invited back. Guess what? They don't have to tell you why.
Yeah,
they don't.
Yeah,
they just,
it's tough.
every year you hope that you get invited back, and if you're not, you have to start all over.
Even if you're every year?
Every year.
So that's until you get like tenured, right?
Every year. So there are some tenured teachers, but after, I forgot what year, it was right before I got hired. So maybe
15
after
years ago.
15 years ago.
My first year.
That went away. So the people that were teaching under that are still tenured, but anybody hired after that, you have to be invited back at the end of the year. So you only sign a 10-month contract.
Way to make dog eat dog out of such a lacking position in America.
It can get political and it can get cliquey and I was crushed. I was crushed, y'all. I had great observations. So we have to be observed as new teachers. We have to be observed as teachers, period. Yeah. And so I was observed and several times, and they were all good observations. Now, obviously, they knew I was a first-year teacher and that I had a rough bunch, but no, I didn't have bad observations. She wouldn't tell me why. She just said, she didn't say anything. She just put the letter in my box, she being the administrator, and there was probably like 7 or 8 of us that year that got the pink slip. I was crushed, even though it was a hard year. I wanted to really work hard and do better the next year, and get a year under my belt. But a teacher that I had worked with at my kids' school when I subbed, I had worked there as her teacher aide. After I subbed for a while, I did teacher's aide. Mm-hmm. She became head of school.
Yeah, I was a paraprofessional was my first.
Same.
Third
And I
grade
loved that. I
paraprofessional,
forgot to mention that in my whole journey. I started out subbing, and then before I went to college was a para, 1 year in a 5th grade gifted class, and that teacher left, so I had to, and they needed me in pre-K, so I did 1 year in pre-K. It's complete opposite ends. But the teacher that I para'd for in the gifted program in 5th grade became head of school at a local private school, and she reached out to me and said, hey, what do you think about 5th grade? And I was like, yay. So I went to 5th grade, taught 5th grade for, gosh, I don't remember how many years, most of them until last year. Last year I moved to 6th grade world history, or ancient civilizations, I like to call it, and 7th grade civics. Okay, favorite group, I'm going to have to say 5th grade right now because that's the group I have the most experience with, but I love the middle schoolers. I love them. They're the best. They're so
Just have
funny.
to learn words like skibbity.
Skibbity toilet, Riz. What else, Brian?
Oh, good Lord.
Oh, my
Ohio.
gosh.
Ohio.
Yeah, it's
Sigma.
different than Omaha. Sigma. Oh my God.
I was telling them last time, sometimes have to text my son and go, what does Sigma mean? They want me to say Sigma.
No cap.
But I loved 5th grade, but it was hard. It's challenging to teach that grade because all of the subjects are tested in 5th grade: reading, writing,
Yeah,
math,
fifth grade's
science.
intense.
And
You're on the way out the door of elementary school
Yeah.
and into middle school, and it's
Yes.
a transitional year. And
it's hard to motivate those kids sometimes. You
Yeah.
really have to build relationships with those kids. And
that
public
takes
school
time.
teacher, it takes
Yeah,
time. And
there's a
public school,
there's a lot of pressure early on to build relationships, and it's important. But it takes time, and it takes
does.
consistency,
It does.
and yeah.
Yeah, but public school teachers' jobs depend on how their students test.
Yeah,
That could be a whole
you-
other episode.
you had mentioned tenure. So like my first year teaching 15 years ago was the year they did away with tenure, and I remember the explanation being, and this was a state level decision. This was not.
So I was
this was
gonna.
not-
I'm sorry to cut you off there,
Go
but
ahead.
I do want to know. You may have said it earlier, but who is they? Was this?
That's what I was about. Yeah,
Okay,
that's what
all
I-
right.
Nationally or is it
Yeah.
state?
It wasn't national. It was a state level decision. It wasn't. It wasn't Bay District schools. It was at the state level,
Jeb.
Florida, and so I think it might have been. Was it Governor Christ at that point?
Sounds right.
That sounds right. Yeah, Charlie Crist was governor at that point, and the decision was made that there were all these teachers that had tenure that were quote unquote bad teachers, and they were difficult to get rid of. So tenure is bad. So they did away with tenure at the state level.
Okay.
But everyone who had tenure kept it, and they just never offered it to anyone after that. So so we're on an annual contract. Anyone that's hired tomorrow, you're on an annual contract, which, you know what? Like, that's the way it is in the business world. Really, like you're on a 1 year contract.
Yeah.
I do. We could go off on a tangent of why tenure is important to protect like academic integrity and make sure that teachers are experts and all that. But
So are you like, with lack of a better term, like our teachers, at least here in the state of Florida, are you essentially subcontracted? Because that's kind of the way it sounds. Is
Yeah,
like you're.
well, you're hired by whatever county you work for, or if you're at a private school, you're hired by whatever school you work for, I assume.
So you're not hired.
Can a private school do tenure, for example? Or,
No, we don't even have contract. We sign a contract when we're there, but it's like I have a job.
Yeah.
And you just have your job. It's
Right.
It's not like in public school where I had to be
Yeah.
re-invited back at the end of every year.
Yeah. So the way that it works right now in Florida and in Bay County is it's year to year. So at the end of the year, they can rehire you or not, and it's
And they
just
don't
an
have to
annual
give
thing.
you any explanation by law.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It is.
I don't-
I mean, it makes it tough to hang on to people.
Yeah. Tenure,
sure,
tenure
but-
has its pluses and it has its minuses, just like everything else.
like everything else. Yeah, that's
So
exactly
it's-
right. And I don't get to influence decisions at the state level, and that ship sailed a long time ago. But yeah.
So
what we had asked about grade levels and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So I had, when I was subbing in North Carolina, I subbed at every level I could, with the understanding that I was going to be a history teacher. So I subbed middle school and high school because I wanted experience in middle school and high school classrooms. But I subbed in whatever I could. I taught PE. PE was actually great. Because we used to play dodgeball in North Carolina. That's not a thing that happens anymore. But man, dodgeball was great. When it rained out, and you could be in the gym and play dodgeball and be like,
yes.
Oh man, that one kid. Because we would play dodgeball as coaches too. It was some sweet payback. And they were the foam dodgeballs that you could like grab a chunk and just make them curve.
Those hurt my arm.
Yeah.
Could you just try to throw them like Randy Johnson?
Yeah, you throw the crap out of it. Yeah. Next thing you know, it's just like
birds are exploding in the middle of the gym. Yeah.
I just heard what you said.
That took a second.
That was a deep cut, that one.
Yeah.
But so I subbed at middle school and high school level because all I wanted to do was teach middle school and high school history. I subbed high school Spanish one time. It was hilarious, and it was a 2-week job. And I walked in the classroom and I said, hey, I'm your Spanish teacher for the next 2 weeks. I've got good news and bad news. I still play good news, bad news with my students. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's such a setup. So I've got good news, bad news. The good news is I do not speak Spanish at all. And they go nuts. And I said the bad news is you guys are going to teach me Spanish for the next 2 weeks. Boo. When I got here and I started going to Gulf Coast to get my certification, I got a job as a paraprofessional at an elementary school because it was just a job that was available. And I was a third grade. I pushed in to do third grade reading, like intensive reading help, like kids who they couldn't read at all. Like they were in third grade and they couldn't read Dr. Seuss. So it was my job to go into like 3 or 4 different classrooms and sit down, and there was this scripted program with a binder where you sit down and they're sounding things out like they would in kindergarten. And when I finished the program at Gulf Coast, there were no middle school, high school social studies jobs available to get hired, but there were all these elementary school jobs. And I was like, okay, I should do this. They need the help. I felt for the kids. So I became an elementary school teacher. And my first year I was 4th grade. And then I taught 3rd grade. And I taught at 3 different elementary schools. And that was, I guess that was the first 6 years of my career. And I would agree with you. Elementary school is nuts. You have an advantage that you have the same kid. Well,
that
advantage.
Could be a disadvantage.
Yeah, you have the same kids all day, so you only have, let's round it off and say you have 25 kids all day. The disadvantage is you're stuck with them. You don't get a break from the kids, and they don't get a break from you.
If one kid's having like a really bad day, there's no, all right, well, Johnny's out of here in an hour anyway.
Maybe, yeah, like you can, yeah, exactly. You're kind of stuck with each other.
Right.
Unless it's something really serious, like they have to go home, they're sick, or something really serious happened, they have to go home.
But there has to be that, I guess, well, like you just said, there's ups and downs to everything, right? But there has to be at least somewhat of a little bit of vindication, talking about little Johnny there, right?
Sure.
He's having a terrible day, or he's just a problem child, and you only have to deal with him for an hour a day. But on the flip side, there's got to be some vindication to being a part of the reason that little Johnny finally finds.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And part of being stuck with those kids is you really get to know those kids because it's only 25 kids. Whereas middle school or high school, you could be dealing with 100 different students every day. So it's a totally different animal. But you're also, elementary school, you're teaching all of the subjects. You're teaching reading, writing, math, science, social studies, all of it, health. Yeah. So I taught that for 6 years, and then I finally got my foot in the door doing middle school. Hopefully, hoping I get to teach middle school history someday. I started teaching middle school math, actually, because they were desperate for math teachers, and had some experience teaching math from elementary school. So I taught middle school math, and then ended up in middle school history. And since then, I've taught high school. At the moment, I'm teaching middle school math. If it seems like if you get a reputation for being willing to work with middle school kids, you're kind of stuck with middle school kids. It's not a bad thing. Middle school kids are fun. It's a really neat time in their development. They grow more than they do at any other stage, I think. So yeah, middle school. This year I'm teaching middle school math and one section of high school history.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be pretty. I always saw you like government economics teacher.
Yeah.
Would be a really cool.
Yeah, it's my thing. It's my passion. Math. For me, I was a terrible math student. I think I did okay in math up until middle school when I was in school, and then just kind of topped out. And the math is a lot harder right now than when I was in school. You're doing what used to be high school level math at the middle school level.
Wow.
But for whatever reason, it's there's a need there for teaching math, and I think maybe as someone who math wasn't their natural thing, I can relate to the kids where it's like, hey, I struggle with this too. Let's learn this together, and I'm doing the math with them, and
That's good.
yeah,
I feel like that works.
yeah.
So you teased this a little bit earlier. Well, I say teased it, but you had mentioned it very briefly. Now we'll come back to it, dealing with parents in 2024. And I understand. So we talked before the show today. Obviously not Drew because he doesn't get here till the buzzer these days.
Sorry, sir. Work is hard.
So, but we talked a little bit today, and I understand you guys have to tiptoe around some of the questions that we had typed up, and we respect that. So if there's some of these that you can't get into, then obviously we understand.
Sure.
But dealing with parents in 2024, what are some of the challenging parts of that, and do you have any stories that you can share?
You want to go first?
I just want to say, before we go off on this discussion, that I have learned that in almost every case, the parents just want the best for their child. Mm-hmm. They just want the best for their kid.
Yep.
Sometimes parents bring this baggage that comes with them into their child's education of whatever experience that parent had in their childhood. They bring that. So if they didn't have a good experience in education, they assume their child's not going to have it, and they are at a heightened sense of awareness. Like it's those ones are hard to reach, but they can be reached, and I have reached them. If that makes any sense, Brian, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I just believe that in almost every instance, I would probably say the parent they just love their child, and they just want the best for their child, and they don't always see educators as on their team. So I think for me, trying to get that over to the parent, that we are a team, we need to work together, that usually works with almost every situation. It's a hard time to be a parent. Very hard time. I'm glad my kids are grown. Y'all parents of young kids today, of teenagers today, I don't know how you do it. I don't. All of these, pat yourself on the back.
If you don't mind me asking, you said kids are grown. Like, how many kids? How old are they?
Okay, I have 3. One is 28, one is 25, one's 24 in a couple weeks.
And so they were going through school before you became a teacher, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And during, they were middle and high school when I became a teacher. But it's hard to be a parent. So some of the stuff that they come with, I get it. It's difficult. It's difficult. It's hard financial times. It's hard, crazy times with social media. It's just hard. It's hard. So
that's going to be another episode.
It should be. I try to keep that in the back of my mind when I'm dealing with an upset parent. You know, I don't know what has happened in their home the night before. I don't know what's happening in their life. Sometimes we're privy to that information. Sometimes, you know, guidance counselors will say, hey, just so you know, or sometimes the family tells us, hey, just so you know, this is going on in our home. And I would say to parents that that is a great thing to do, to let your child's teacher know if there are things going on at home or in your personal life that would affect your child on a daily basis. We want to work as a team. So I don't know what stories that I really want to get into, but I just wanted to say that. I really believe that parents are doing their best. We need to be a team, and I wouldn't want to be a parent right now. I wouldn't. It's very, very hard.
Yeah. So the thing that really surprised me when I became a teacher was the overwhelming number of students that were coming from broken homes. I knew that it wasn't going to be a majority of students, but I had no idea that it was going to be an overwhelming majority of students. And there, I don't want to call it. There's a cartoon that I saw years ago, and it was, and this makes it kind of, it oversimplifies it, but it shows parents in the past, and there's two parents standing there, and the teacher's standing there, and they're saying, what is the deal with these bad grades? And the two parents and the teacher are looking at the kid, and the kid is looking up at them like, oh man, I'm in trouble with the adults. Like, I'm in trouble with the teacher, and I'm in trouble with both my parents. Fast forward, and then the other frame of the cartoon is what's going on with these bad grades. And you've got the parents that are looking at the teacher, blaming the teacher, and the kid is just sitting there in the background kind of like, I'm getting away. I'm
guilty of that, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid there's this... and I'm not blaming teachers, I'm not blaming parents, I'm not blaming students. There's plenty of blame to go around for everybody. I'm afraid that we've gotten to a place where kids know how to play adults off of each other. And so they will play their parents off the teacher, they will play their parents off each other, they will play teachers off principals, administrators, and that's not the kid's fault. It's just kind of where we're at, and adults who they really do mean the best and they want the best for the kid. We're kind of afraid to, maybe not afraid to talk to each other, but we don't know how to have the conversation. I know that as a young person becoming a teacher, it was, and when my kids were really, really little, it was really intimidating for me to talk to parents of these kids. Like, oh my God, I'm responsible for your kids. I was really intimidated by parents. As my kids got older, I think I got more comfortable talking with parents. But I every year I struggle, and I don't blame the parents. I feel like I don't do enough to connect with the parents, and some of that is, am I supposed to call you? Am I supposed to email you? Am I supposed to get you on this social media? There's so many different inboxes that we're all checking for information, and there's so many opportunities for us to misunderstand each other. And so I'd put that in with the technology thing. Like, I really do think parents and teachers want the best for the kid, but too often we find each other at odds. And whether the kid is being purposefully manipulative or not, they're just, we're supposed to be on the same team, and it's tough to maintain that. This is coming out more negative than I meant.
No, well, it makes sense. I'm glad you said it because it's
along the same lines of talking with parents and kind of helping them understand their kids from educator's perspective, a question that I had wrote on there was kind of I've been going back through the Friday Night Lights series, and it's largely based around a high school football team, but there's also the educational side of it, because if you don't have good grades, you can't play.
Right. Yep.
Coach Taylor's wife, Tammy Taylor, she ends up being one of the guidance counselors in the series. And one of her biggest things, she ends up going to one of the lesser schools in the area, and all of the parents, she gets overhauled with all of the, she gets appalled, really, at all of these parents that just seem like they don't care about their kids' education.
Right.
And she takes it as her personal mission to to engage the parents and say, hey, I need your help teaching these kids. So my question to you guys is that was a TV show from the early 2000s. In today's world, how do you try to get the parents involved in helping you engage the students' minds to get them into a different perspective and ready to learn? Because you can send them with homework as much as you want.
Right.
If they're not getting the like my parents, they very rarely checked if I did my homework. And I very rarely did my homework. But I know friends that they weren't allowed to play their PlayStation or their Xbox, or they weren't able to go outside until they finished their homework.
Right.
So how do you get the parents engaged in the students' learning?
Can I jump in real quick with something in it? Something that I learned. I have 3 kids. My oldest is 15. I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. One of the things that I noticed in the last couple of years is a lot of times we treat families as if they're like a one-off siloed thing, like these parents, this family, this house. My 3 kids are completely different. They're completely different. They have the same mom and dad, and I have one of my kids is super conscientious, just gets like A's and B's, and it's not because she's like smart. It's because she does the things she's supposed to. I have another kid, and they're super smart. That he just isn't interested, and he's a super smart kid, and he gets decent grades, but he doesn't get exceptional grades. He could, but he doesn't want to. And then I have another kid that she just does her thing. She's not like over the moon about stuff, but she gets things done. So every kid is different, and even within households and families. And parents want the best for their kids, but ultimately, and especially as the kids get older, so much of it has to do with the kid, and the kid owning their responsibility and their education, and making sure that the kids are doing the things that they're supposed to, and that it doesn't become about, the teacher isn't doing what they're supposed to, or, the parent isn't doing what they're supposed to. Ultimately, especially into middle school and high school, the kid has to be the one that they're...
The kid has to have some kind of motivation. I would say, to answer your question, it's easier on the elementary level to build that bridge with the families, because you're with those same kids all day, every day. I had, ways to reach out, ways to include the parents in what we were doing in the classroom, social media things. We had Class Dojo,
right,
which we could post what we were doing and give the kids points and interact that way. It was easier in elementary. Right. It's a little harder
and it's
in
like
middle.
25 families versus 100 middle school, high school. Yeah.
I'm in private school now, so I don't have that much problem with what you're asking about. Most of those kids are, if they're not intrinsically motivated, they are because they don't want to lose privileges. We do have a couple that struggle, but there's stuff going on in their family, though. You know what I mean? So it's all such an intricate. How do you say the word? Help me, someone. Intricate web of
Mr. Right
child personality.
Hey, Kyle did that.
Yes,
yeah.
The family dynamics.
I worded.
Yeah. And something that I'll put with that, like I'm lucky that right now I'm working at a smaller school. I work at a charter school. It's called Palm Bay, and it's a much smaller school, and so we have the advantage of having fewer students at the secondary level, where we can have fewer kids so that we can build stronger relationships with those kids and build stronger relationships with the families. And that's not to knock larger schools. You know, larger schools have massive athletic programs. So, you know, one of the things that I've learned, and this is something that is a contentious issue for some people, is I'm at a charter school now versus a public school, and there's a lot of animosity between public and charter schools, and there's a lot of it comes from misunderstandings about what they are, and I've worked at both.
Do you mind spending just a moment explaining the differences between the two?
Sure. So, like a public, part of the problem is a charter school is a public school. It is. Anyone can go there, and it's publicly funded. Where it gets into dicey territory is your traditional public schools dislike charter schools because they feel that they are getting in on their territory. And I understand that, because we're taking students and we're taking funding, and that's the argument against it.
Getting the benefits without having the...
Sure.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's like moving next door. Like, it's no different. It's the same county. It's the same kids. Yeah. It's the same teachers. Yeah. They're just in a different room. So the arguments about taking funding away, there's a lot of animosity and misunderstanding between public schools and charter schools. Charter schools are publicly funded. A traditional public school is you go to the school in your neighborhood. And even that's been kind of confused, because with school choice, you don't have to go to the school in your neighborhood. You can drive your kid wherever, which is great to me. I mean, if you can find the best school for your kid, you know, like maybe your kid's athletic. You need a big school with a huge athletic program. Maybe your kid's not athletic. Maybe or maybe I have one kid that's athletic and one kid that's not, and they go to two different schools.
How are the students selected?
That's one of the sticky
points.
That's one of the sticky points, and it really is up to each individual charter. And I'm speaking to my experience at my own charter school, and there's been a lot of accusations that you get to cherry pick your students, and that's not true. It's not how it works. For example, Palm Bay is a Title I charter school, which means we get additional funding because of the number of students that we have that are coming from a less affluent background, for example. I think in the county, charter schools have gotten kind of an identity where it's like, oh, these are publicly funded private schools. I think that's unique. That's unique to Bay County because, again, I have family in New York, and in New York, it's the opposite. The charter schools are the ones that the poorer kids go to. They're not like private schools, and you're picking out the kids that are most successful and most affluent and sending them to a private school for free. You're not picking kids based on their performance or picking kids based on their income. You get the kids you get, and by willingness of the parents who choose to bring their kids to our school, we have a group of parents and students who make the effort to bring their kids to our school, and yeah, I don't know. I trailed off there at the end, but it just seems to me there's a lot of animosity and kind of antagonism between public and charter, and I don't think that we're stealing resources from each other, and I think that giving kids and parents more options and more choices for their kids is a good thing. It's a good thing.
So this one's another one to kind of. No, did you have something real quick?
Not on that. I was going to ask a different question, but go right ahead.
Oh, did you go last or did I go last?
I think
It was a little while ago.
Go ahead.
I think you're up. No, I'm up. Yeah.
Yeah, you're up.
I feel like I'm in a ping pong.
So let's go into the classroom.
There it is.
Okay.
What if I were to be a fly on the wall? What would be a typical day for you and your class? What would we observe you and your class doing?
Depends on whether it's the beginning of the year, middle of the year, or end of the year.
let's
Because we're
say-
starting back up to, yeah.
Let's say we'll kind of mix these two questions because the next question I was going to ask is like, what's your day? Like, what does a daily routine look like for you?
Yeah.
So like, let's take 2 different times of the year. Let's say, all right, this is a Monday through Wednesday, the second to last week before the end of the first semester. Like, so we know we got exams coming up, right? Oof. So what? So we'll take that week, and then give me a Monday to Friday in February.
Yeah.
You mean from the teacher's perspective? Or
Yeah,
from
yeah. Like
the
what?
student?
Yeah, no. From a teacher's perspective, like how do you prepare? Like how's the preparation different between getting ready for the big exams at the end of the semester as opposed to like teaching the regular curriculum here in February? Because you're not necessarily building up to something in February besides like regular testing,
Do you want to go
right?
first?
I know.
Think about this.
I can.
Curveball.
I can. I feel like I'm talking too much.
I would just say that for me, the easy part, I don't know about you, is when it becomes exam time. We do midterms, and end of course, not end of course, but
It was around Christmas or
yes,
January. Or,
yes.
yeah.
To me, that's I wouldn't say easy time, but it's review, and they're familiar with these concepts, most of them. Although last time we were reviewing, and some kids were like, "We didn't learn any of this." And I'm like, "Yes, we did. I remember it."
I was that guy.
Yeah, you were that guy. I was that kid too in school. Like, what?
Likely story.
What
Well,
is this?
Yeah. No. I'm sorry. Go on.
So for me, oh gosh, I'm not sure what y'all are asking. What do you mean? Like, what's a day like? What do we do by the minute? Like, what's my?
Yeah, from 7:48 a.m.
You don't want to do
7:48.
Yeah.
48.
Bam.
It's a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. It really is.
It's nonstop.
Like summer.
I don't know about you. It's
Yeah.
nonstop.
Summer's withdrawals. It really
For
is.
sure.
Do you guys get like a period off?
Yes. Yeah. You get one.
Planning
So an
periods.
elementary school teacher, usually when they go to like PE or art or whatever that is, they'll have their planning period, and that's used to meet with other people, plan instruction, grade papers, things like that.
Contact parents.
Yeah.
Breathe.
Sometimes, yeah. Go for a walk
Disassociate for
outside.
5 minutes. That's about.
Yeah, and then for secondary, it's the same kind of thing. You have one period out of the day where it's you have that.
Yeah, it's nonstop.
Does
it's
that-
exhausting, but never a dull moment. There's never a boring time. To me, now my students might watch this and go, "Miss Fisher, girl, you lying. It's boring."
Yeah.
But I love it, and I try to make the content exciting so that the kids get involved and take ownership.
Yeah.
It's just a time. I don't know. Are you asking like how do we teach? Is that what you're asking? Like, what do y'all mean by this?
Like just like what does your routine look like basically? Like you get to the school.
Immediately take roll in class.
Oh
you go.
no! You get to the school and immediately you're
check your mailbox.
Yes.
Yeah, you check your mailbox, you go to your room, you
fire up technology.
Yeah, turn everything on.
Make sure the technology
Make sure stuff
that I
is
have
working,
planned for that day, that
Yeah.
my video links are working, and if they're not, what's plan B is my,
Do they still have the rolling TVs that roll in and show?
Oh man,
No.
so that
Those were great days.
That's
We
Overhead
got
projectors.
YouTube now.
So my first year as an elementary school teacher, I had the overhead projector with the VCV markers
too.
and
I
transparency.
love
And you
those.
wind up the
So
transparency.
within
Yes.
15 years, I've gone from using that to using a smart board.
Those are great for math because you're covering something and you go, remember last week when we learned, and you just go, you roll it back and you show them.
Look, we did it there.
Did it there.
Well, you can take the answers away too because it's transparent.
Yes.
But I would have ink all over myself.
All over your arm.
From that to smart boards.
Don't you agree that
And-
now sorry to interrupt you, but technology makes this job so much easier? Like I think back in the day to my teachers when I was a kid, when it was open up your textbook, let's read this page, let's read that page. Okay, answer the questions, turn in your paper. And we still have to do that to some extent, but
Well,
we've
then
got,
there you go. So there's a segue into a different question then, because the I guess the routine question didn't hit or didn't land rather.
sorry. My two brain cells are
But Drew had one. Drew, you had one in here that's like perfect for
Yeah.
that conversation.
Technology plays a major part in everyday life these days. With the added benefits and detriments, how does it help or hinder your teaching? Because from my perspective, I was a bad kid. I had my phone on me at all times, and I was a part of those kids that you run the microphone, your headphone ear, and you're sitting there hanging out like this, and you got your headphone, you're listening to music. Yes, I'm paying attention, but I've got my music playing. So I could see that as a hindrance, but you were just saying it's a great teaching tool, and I could see that because the internet's a great place.
oh
Can be a bad place, but it's also a great place. So, honestly, a lot of my questions that Kyle is raving about, that he's saying I did a great job. A quick Google search, you're amazed at what a quick Google search will do.
oh absolutely.
You just gotta cater it for the different
Why would
places.
you tell me that? I was so proud of you.
Hey, I still had that good part earlier in the episode.
1 for 2 ain't bad.
Technology for a teacher, for my tools, is the best thing ever. It helps me, and this was my first year teaching both these subjects. Okay, ancient civilizations and civics, and I told the kids at the beginning of the year, listen, Miss Fisher's learning with you this year too. Yes, I've learned this stuff before, but I'm learning with you. So to be able to pull up these amazing videos and have these games like Kahoots and Quizlet and all these things that the kids get excited about. Kids get excited when you can incorporate technology. However, they will have, they will not always do the right thing. I had a 5th grader the year before last. We were doing a Kahoot for a science review, and I make them use their first name because if you let them pick nicknames, I don't know about you, they pick just stupid stuff. And anyway, so I'm like, just your first name.
Oh
So-
yeah, I know what you're talking about. So there are these basically like game shows that you can have the kids play, and they log in, and everyone plays the game show against each other.
Yeah.
And when they log in, they can pick a name, or you can assign them some silly automatic name like red bird or
Right.
gray squirrel, or it gives them like this random generated name, or they can pick their own name, and then that can become problematic
Then
because
they
you've
pick
got
stuff like
Skibbity 8 and
69,
like,
Yo Mama 84, and then you're like, who put this up there?
yeah.
So I just
then
who
you're playing
is-
a different game. You're not
Yeah.
playing the game show. You're
Exactly.
playing
Who
a
is your
totally
mama?
different game in your classroom.
But
yeah.
you know what I mean?
You
Y'all were in
answered
middle
everything
school.
correctly, but who is
Who's
Yo Mama?
Yo Mama 84. Who put that up there?
Yeah.
But anyway, I wouldn't let them do that because also in the review, I wanted to see, it's a game, but when we're done and they go on to PE, I can look and see, okay, who got these questions right? Who do we need to, look at and
Go
focus
back
on?
over.
Go back over. But anyway, so I'm waiting on everybody to get logged in, and I'm counting how many kids are logged in, how many kids I got in the class, and I'm like, wait, there's an extra person on there, and then like this other name. I'm like, who is whatever it was?
Yeah.
And one of my kids we didn't allow them to have their phones, but they would sneak them in their pocket. He had FaceTimed a friend in North Carolina and given our Kahoot code so the kid could join our Kahoot. And I was like, oh. So, yeah, good one, I know. I didn't let him play.
He wouldn't get caught.
He was already in trouble with his phone, though, for showing twerking videos to the little kids on the playground. So that's a whole nother discussion. This and elementary kids do not mix. Middle school kids do not mix. But anyway, so technology has been great for me. Oh, y'all, no, listen, we had a 5th grader. I'm not saying the school, I'm not saying the kid's name. A 5th grader showing Pornhub on his phone to the little bitty kids on the school bus. No, it's terrible. It's terrible. Goodness. So we don't allow.
What is that?
So the kids have school issued Chromebooks that have firewalls and all those things put up, so they can only go on what we allow them. However, they will find ways around, and they will find ways to play games while they're supposed to be doing
Dear
other
baby
things.
Jesus. Oh.
Y'all haven't a clue. Y'all haven't a clue, I'm telling you. Kyle, just wait. Till
I will say, as far as technology in the classroom, when I first started teaching, smartphones were kind of a new thing, and it would have been the same time because the iPhone was 2008. So we all started having these devices on us in the classroom as adults before the kids did. And I remember the first half decade of my career, there was a lot of pushback where teachers should not be on their phones, which was correct. We should not be on our phones. We should not be texting each other. We should not be making personal calls during the day. Towards the end, it was you definitely shouldn't be on Facebook or YouTube when you're supposed to be teaching kids. By this point, the phones hadn't really made it into the kids' hands yet, but the adults had them. And so there was some real pushback on that. And then I would argue that 2 really big things happened. And it wasn't just that the kids started getting the phones younger and younger. That happened. Yeah. But there were 2 major things that happened. In Bay County, the first thing that happened was the hurricane. And when kids went back to school after the hurricane, and when adults went back to school after the hurricane, phones were no longer optional. They were not. We needed them to be able to communicate with each other. I remember vividly the first time I gave a principal, and it wasn't even a principal, but like an administrator, an assistant principal, my personal cell phone number so that they could text me during the day at school. And I remember that being like kind of a firewall where it was like, no, this is my personal number. I don't use this for work. I didn't check my work email on my phone. Like, it was personal. But it became almost mission critical for that sort of thing to be shared in Bay County because that's the only way we could communicate with each other. And I think the same thing happened at about the same time to a lesser degree with parents and students. And then what really doubled down on that was when we had shutdowns for COVID because everybody went home. Yeah. And then all the restrictions on phones were off because we needed them to learn. And putting that genie back in the bottle has been tough. I will say at my school, I've had 2 instances where there's been, at 2 schools I've worked at, where there was like what I would call a hard ban on cell phones. And it was great. It was literally like not just the kids, but the adults woke up from being in a coma as far as their attention span. We rolled out a ban on cell phones last year at my school, and it had fantastic results. But it's tough. I mean, you really have to lean into it. Like you do not use these at school. And I think the district is starting to push back as a county. And we're pushing back on it with students. I'm going to upset some people. I think we need to do the same thing with adults. I think we need to be off our phones too. We need to be unreachable sometimes.
As Drew and I
to
are
have
texting
focus.
back and forth.
Yeah, I'm looking at you guys doing that, and I'm
yeah.
like, man, this is good stuff.
We're shooting back and forth because we
we're
don't want
behind the scenes right now, trying to figure out who's going to ask the next question.
basically, and also trying to avoid
Yeah.
4-hour episode because I feel like
my
we have
God.
so many more
That
questions.
could
Yeah.
be a whole episode.
We have a boat.
Well, I mean, we could go head to head because the weird thing is when I first started teaching, I was like one of the younger. I was one of the younger, like early technology adopter people, and I got a reputation as being like, you're the teacher who uses technology, and I do games, and the games are fantastic, but I'm also a little bit of a Luddite, and Luddite is like afraid of new technology. We don't do enough with books. We don't.
Yes,
we use too much. We use screens too much. And the weird thing, the routine. If you came into my classroom, the kids are going to be on the computer. They are. And so I sound like a hypocrite, but textbooks are a good thing. Like, unfortunately, I think 90% of what kids are reading in school was probably written in the last 5 to 10 years.
That's insane.
It is insane. And there's more. There in the last 5 years, there's been more signs of older, what would you call them, classics making a comeback. Kids reading older materials, classic literature coming back. There's been an awesome resurgence in Greek mythology, like the Percy Jackson stuff has really relit kids with Greek mythology, and I think there's a lot of older material, not necessarily curriculum, but just older material that
whole different tangent, but we were just talking at work the other day about how lacking in Greek mythology we really are. Like just like even from a content perspective, you know, obviously with the Avengers and everything, you've got a lot of the stuff that covers like North mythology, but Greek is something that doesn't get touched a whole lot.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that melts brains in my classroom.
Thor, Loki,
is the
Odin, all that. Yeah.
Okay, so Thor. So why is the spelling of Wednesday all screwed up? Why is it Wednesday? Did you guys ever wonder about that?
Yes.
I didn't think we were going to get quizzed.
No, well, you brought it to okay.
I'm going to detention. Sorry.
So Thursday is actually Thor's Day. It is, and I joke about that with my students, like it's Thor's Day, and bust out the hammer. It's Thor's Day. That's where the name comes from. It comes from not ancient, but like an old Viking Germanic spelling. Thor's Day, Thursday. Okay, so Wednesday it's a spelling changes over time. It's Woden's Day, Wodin, Woden. It's Odin's Day, and that's why it's got the DNS, because it's literally Odin's Day, Wednesday, Odin's Day, Woden's Day.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interessante.
We're learning.
Yeah.
You have taught me something, sir.
Hey,
thank you, Mr. Bassett.
That's what we're here for.
I didn't take notes.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I get it. So
different tangent. Sorry.
I like using technology in the classroom, but the thing that really fires me up, and then back to the beginning, what got me into teaching was thinking that there are things in the past that people need to know, and that we're forgetting those things and not paying attention to them, and I am still finding stuff. I'm not like no expert. I'm a student.
So from a day-to-day perspective, year-to-year perspective, how much does curriculum change? And how much do you as a teacher, and how much do teachers in general have a say in what gets taught and how it gets taught?
It changes too much, and
it does. Yeah.
And you can't. That's not there's plenty of blame to go around. The state changes the curriculum, the district changes the curriculum, the schools change the curriculum. There's a lot of people who have the ability to change the curriculum, and then the teacher changes the curriculum ultimately because they're the last decision maker. It hasn't happened at the federal level in a while.
Depending on your if public school, especially in the elementary level, they're told you are going to use this curriculum. You have to use it with fidelity. That means you can't veer off of it.
Yeah.
I have way more freedom at the private school level to pick what I mean, they give me autonomy for all of that. I mean, they give me curriculum that I can use, but they also let me, go off and find other things, articles or whatnot. But in the public school, it's a whole different game, especially at Title I schools, if I'm not mistaken. They are very much have to stick with the curriculum that is.
Well, and a lot of the stuff at the younger ages, it almost has to be that way because in those early years, and you said you taught kindergarten, right? So like the kids are learning to read versus later on where they're reading in order to learn. I think a lot of the stuff is scripted and it almost has to be. I mean, I remember the alphabet people and spelling stuff. It's very, very, very scripted.
Does that make it easier or harder or more frustrating? Or because if it's scripted, from my perspective, it would be, okay, well, my lesson plan's already done. I walk in, I do it, and I'm out the door, and then I'm into the next day and doing that. But I could also see, especially from your perspective, you don't have the freedom to teach how you want to teach.
You need to have room for roadblocks, right?
Yeah, it's easier when you're a brand new teacher to have that scripted curriculum. But as you get a little bit better at what you do, you know, especially someone my age, I've lived, I've learned, I've read. Mm-hmm. When you want to bring in other things that you know would be more helpful, it depends on your school and your administrator as well. I've always been blessed with great environments to where they trusted us to do what they hired us to do.
Yeah.
But there are some schools that they have to do the prescribed curriculum. Usually those are schools that are struggling.
And sometimes they're required to do that by the county or even by the state. If a school has like a failing school grade, the state will come in and tell them you have to do X, Y, and Z, and there's much less flexibility.
I would say you've got to be a good teacher to be able to kind of veer off that scripted curriculum business, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I
clung to it at first, but then you start to think, oh, well, you know, maybe I could reach them better by bringing it to them this way or what have you. Does that make sense?
To bring it back to books, I do see more books in classrooms in the last 5 years. They really did fall out, especially when we shifted from computer labs to laptops. It hurt my back to say that. But my first couple years, we used to have to go to a room with a bunch of desktop computers, and you would have to sign up on a spreadsheet to be like, I need 30 minutes in the computer lab. And then
that's the school that we came up in.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
And now it's everybody has a laptop on a cart. And to go back to me being a kind of a Luddite, I almost wish we would go back the other way because the laptops have their disadvantages. They're mobile. They end up in the wrong place. They don't get charged. The kids can very conveniently hide what they're doing.
And they can cheat.
And they can cheat. Yeah. I don't want to go down the cheating rabbit hole tonight.
We might have to do a part 2 of this.
Yeah.
And I mean that. Like we said that last time, but I mean that just because we have so many more things here, and we're coming up on this hour and a half mark, which I feel like is probably a really good stopping point for anything content related. I do want to ask, and this one, when we talk about tiptoeing, I know is really hard, so I'm not going to give specific examples of what I'm asking about necessarily, but obviously we mentioned it earlier. Political stuff is very, very involved in everything we do, especially in your world. And I know you tiptoe around it on this podcast, but you also have to tiptoe around it in real life. and especially in your jobs. How hard is it to navigate this political climate as an educator?
Are you talking about like with the teaching of, history or government, like that kind of thing specifically?
Things that that happen that we don't want to teach anymore. Things that, children, golly, man, trying to find a way to ask this without directly saying
transgender kind of stuff?
Yeah, right. I
don't find that it has, I try to tell people, like, your mom gets fired up. No, nobody's going to teach my grandson that it's okay to be, dressed like a woman. And I go, we don't teach that stuff. I don't know who's telling you. We ain't got time to teach that stuff.
No, I don't necessarily mean teaching it directly. I just mean like having a student who thinks that they're going through that kind of thing. How do you and maybe you haven't had that specifically yet, but I say the word yet because as time progresses, it's going to happen. And I don't mean this in a negative light or anything, but I just mean, how do you navigate a political climate like this when you have kids that are very confused? That's where
I had a fifth grader. Okay, so at the beginning of the year during our PLC, we talked about PLCs earlier. That means professional learning communities, basically your grade level. At our PLC meeting before school started, the principal came in and sat down and said, "Hey, just letting y'all know, we have a new student. This student has 2 parents of the same gender, and this student is one gender but wants to be referred to as the other. So we're going to let them use, the bathroom wasn't an issue because in the classrooms, everybody used the bathroom.
Right.
Does that make sense? And we just did what the parents wanted us to. We didn't call the student the other gender. The student's name is what we used, but we did tiptoe around it. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
I've only had to deal with that in that one instance. And the child, was a different step. The child I don't want to get too deep into it.
No,
but,
but
the principal comes to us. It's very serious, and they're like, "Listen, we don't want to upset people. We're going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to make sure this and this happens." So it's there. I don't think it's as prevalent as people think. Do you agree? You've taught middle and high longer than I have. I don't.
What was the question?
He's in the right group, isn't he?
No, that's fair. Yeah. Now, if you don't feel comfortable even talking about it in general, like that, don't mean to put you on the spot. It's a hard one to navigate.
I'm going to respect the fact that children are still they're still easily trying to find out who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's a part of it, and I'm going to respect it to the best of my ability, if that makes sense.
I've found. So maybe the best answer I can give to this. There's a lot in the media about how schools are politicizing students, and my experience, that has not been the case. I've taught middle school and high school social studies, and the people that I've worked with try to not take sides.
Yeah.
And there's an effort to not okay. So the best way I can tell this is maybe with a story. You had mentioned you taught 7th grade civics. It's one of my favorite grades and subjects to teach. And one of the things that inevitably happens in middle school and in high school is the kids want to know who you voted for.
Yes.
And especially when you're teaching them about presidential history and the history of elections and all these different things. And it's difficult to get across to a student why you don't want to tell them that. And it almost always comes across as, well, that's because they don't want to tell you, they don't want to tell me that they voted for that person. Like it comes across that way. When in reality, part of your right to vote is your right to not tell who you're voting for. It's a secret ballot. You don't have to share it. And if you had to share it, you wouldn't have a right to vote. Like if you had to tell people who you were voting for, you actually don't have a choice, because then you can be intimidated and all this different stuff back and forth. So my students get really frustrated that I wouldn't tell them, well, did you vote for Obama? Did you vote for Trump? And I would say evasive but true things like, I have voted for candidates from the Democratic Party and from the Republican Party, which is true. And a student got very frustrated and said, Mr. Bassett, you just don't want to tell us who you voted for. And I said, no. I felt like this was just this like Robin Williams standing on the desk, like just great, great turn of phrase. I said, I don't want to teach you to think like me. I want to teach you how to think.
Wow.
And I thought that was a mic drop moment.
Yeah.
And the kid goes, Mr. Bassett, I would never think like you. You think way too much.
You think way too much.
Yeah. Top 5 moments in a classroom.
Love it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of have to thread the needle politically. Mm-hmm. I've found that as far as colleagues and even leadership, I have never felt pressured politically one way or the other. Now, if you wanted to, and put a pin in this for next time, if you wanted to talk about actual content and political bias in the content, that is a totally different story.
Even at the elementary level, yes.
Yeah, that is a totally different story. And I think that is not...
I'm actually doing that. I'm going to throw some asterisk on that.
And again, I don't think that is a thing that is being directed. I think it's just the people that are writing the material. I really don't think... I don't think it's a decision by principals or even districts or at this, well, maybe more at the state level, probably more.
Because they choose what books and...
Yeah, especially in our state has been kind of forward with those things. But, as far as political bias one way or the other.
And to piggyback off what you're saying, my students want to know that too. Ms. Fisher, who do you vote for? And I tell them it doesn't matter because, yes, I want you to understand the election process and I want you to be a good citizen and to know our government. But what I want even more so out of my students is you to be a good human. And I tell them, I give them an example. My husband and I have different political views. We've been married 30 years.
Very far.
Oh, complete.
Apart. Yeah, very far
and
apart.
And so I want to teach them it doesn't matter who I voted for. It doesn't matter who your parents voted for. What matters is we got to vote, and we're going to respect one another's opinion. And I'm not wrong, and Mr. Fisher is not wrong.
Yeah.
We have to learn in this society, especially now. I don't know what's going on, but we are just tribal, right? We just want to fuss and declare that the other side is wrong and they're dumb and they're uneducated. Well, that's not true. Everybody has good points on their side, and I try to teach them it doesn't matter who I voted for. I guess I voted. That's what's important. We have to respect that people don't always think like we do.
Very important for kids, especially around that middle school age, like to start to understand that they're very blessed to live in a country where everybody has a voice like that.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like, I'm someone who's very much into history, and I enjoyed history when I was in middle school and high school, and I probably personally, without calling balls and strikes here, I follow current events and politics and things like that the way y'all probably follow sports, but I as a teenager, I don't remember really knowing what the heck was going on with the president until I was about 18.
But do you agree?
So
that
I think we project. I think we
into it
project
now?
a lot of it. Yeah. Well,
Social media, right?
I guess
Goes
so.
back
But
to that
they are
conversation.
interested. They
yeah,
want to know.
They are, but they're also
They more want to know why their parents are pissed.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's correct. They
Yes.
want to know why everyone else
Yes.
is obsessed with it. And a good example is in a social studies classroom. If you mention recent President X, kids don't say anything. If you mention recent President Y, everyone goes boo, and that don't read into like chromosomes there or anything. I'm not like I'm trying to disguise the identity. But like you mention one president, there's no response, or they say yay, and you mention a different president, and they say boo, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's just kids being kids, you know.
Well, that's your first mistake. When I was in school, I didn't get to talk out of turn. Otherwise, I was sent to the principal.
You can't shut him up.
No, we can. We should go down that rabbit hole another time too. Yeah.
Well, Drew, you're gonna close us out with a specific one here.
Yeah, I teased it earlier. My coworker, whenever I was talking with him about tonight's episode, he was like, "Well, I've got a kid who's coming of age and needing to go to school," and he kind of asked me, he's like, "Can you ask them this question?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll definitely ask him." So, Jeffrey, here in a little bit, can you write down a time frame and we could snippet this so I can send it to him? My coworker has a daughter who is a month past the cutoff to go to pre-K for last year. She is now a year older than her possible classmates, and she gets everyday teaching from her mom every morning, going over the ABCs, etc., stuff like that. In your opinion, when should a child start pre-K, and is it necessary?
I could give this while they're thinking of their answers. I can give you this from a parent's perspective.
Yes, which is a good perspective.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. If we hadn't put Carson in pre-K, because Carson is on the other end of that spectrum, he is like on the low end of that cutoff. So he is like younger than anybody in his class, but going to pre-K, and this is where he learned his ABCs and everything like that before he got to kindergarten. This is where he learned how to write, how to draw, how to do all these other like basic skills that you need that they're going to teach you in kindergarten, but having a head start on that, especially at a young age, I will tell you from a parent's perspective, like Ezra will go to pre-K because of the incredible experience that we had from sending Carson. So yeah, that's just my answer from a parent's perspective. Now, from an educator's perspective.
No, I agree with you. All three of mine I sent to pre-K. And yes, I was that mom. I read to them and we watched Sesame Street and they knew their letters and sounds and we did all of those things. But I sent them to pre-K because it's also for the social and starting
free
school,
babysitter for a little while.
That too.
True that.
But it's for them to be able to socialize in that big group of kids, and that's hard for a child when they're used to being the only child around, or maybe just one of a couple, and then you're in a great big group, and it's a hard adjustment for some kids, and I to wait until kindergarten for that to happen, it could be a little.
Well, and that's interesting, and that's where I was going to go with that. Is that's what kindergarten used to be for?
Socializing, yeah.
Yeah, it's a German word. It was a child garden, and it wasn't supposed to be numbers and letters yet. I mean, other than maybe recognizing them, but this goes back to high school math being in middle school now. It's. I can understand why no one would want to say, "Hey, we need to lower standards." Like no one's going to say that. Everyone wants to say we need higher standards. We need higher standards. I do think socializing your kids, sending them to pre-K, exposing them to things like that. But keep in mind that kids learn at different rates. They do. And back to my own example of having 3 different kids. They learn at different speeds and different rates, and a kid who appears behind another kid in 3rd grade might blow that kid out of the water in 6th grade. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. So I would just recommend giving them opportunities and exposing them to let's see, at that young age. I know everyone says read to them every single night. Even if you're reading the same book over and over and over again, just exposing them to what a book is. And one of the things we did with our kids that I don't have any evidence of this, but I swear it helped, is from the time my kids were really little, we had closed captions on our TV 24/7, no matter what we were watching, so that there was always words at the bottom of the screen, so that they could read. And back to technology, I think that's an awesome thing, that you can always have the words on the screen.
I think him even asking the question was a great sign that he wants to, like you said earlier, Miss Fisher. Mrs. by the way,
Mrs.
Sorry. He even wants he wants the best for his kids.
Yeah,
he wants to make sure that they are taken care of, and for his two daughters. So I've just met the man. Seems like a great guy. Seems like a great parent. So I'm glad I could give him some resolution on that.
That his only kid?
Two.
The other one older?
Two daughters, younger.
Younger. Okay, baby.
Yeah.
At that point. Okay.
We vote pre-K. It's great.
Yeah. I agree on that parents' perspective. All right. Well, with that said, we are over the time that I thought we were going to go here, but it kind of just tends to be a situation you hit when you're having a great conversation like this. And I know that we got like 2 weeks until you guys are like back to, you ain't up at 9 o'clock pretty much.
1 week.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Back a week.
Yeah, that's right. You guys are back next week. Yep. That's what you told me earlier.
Yeah, but just adults, no kids.
Yeah, just adults. But still, got to get out of the bed and put on clothes.
I think August 12th is official Bay County back to school date. Is that?
That's right.
Am I correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So
already here.
We're coming up on it.
They
man.
keep moving. They keep moving the. I had this conversation with a colleague this morning. I swung by my school and saw someone that I hadn't seen since last summer. He's like, oh, man, it's starting back earlier this year. And I say, yeah, we never notice when it ends early.
Yeah.
But, like, we have been moving it back gradually every year, and it's been ending earlier and earlier. And,
it ended like
it's starting earlier and earlier.
Shortly after Memorial Day this year.
No, before Memorial Day.
Memorial
Day,
that's
the second
right.
year in a row that it's been before Memorial Day. They keep moving it back a day every year. It's like, I don't know if it's, like, reverse leap year, like if we're trying to maybe all the clocks are wrong and we're trying to fix it and no one's told us. I
think that makes more sense anyway, right? Because you right there at the end of the year have a three day weekend, and then you kind of roll into like the last several days of school.
It's awesome. And there's a lot of teachers. I don't want to speak for you, but there's a lot of teachers out there on social media and stuff that complain about like, people say that we get summers off, but we really work this many hours. Yeah, that's true. I'm not going to make that argument. Having summers off is kind of awesome.
Oh,
it really is.
Nobody.
We don't get a ton of perks.
Summers
off is awesome, and I don't work over the summer.
No, I don't either.
Sorry.
I have a whole bag that I brought home and thought I was going to work, and I've yet to crack it open.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm not going to. Not that I don't love my job, but we need that time to rest.
Yeah. And
it takes a lot. You give a lot, especially for someone. Sorry to interrupt. I'm an introvert at heart, so to be in such a social setting all day throughout the school year, it's draining.
That's true. Yeah, well, that's one thing we didn't talk about is that it's like the number of social interactions you have with your colleagues and with the kids. It's just like constant back.
Maybe that's why that one question was so hard to answer, because
routine.
I'm like, oh my God, it's just here we go.
We didn't touch on a lot of things that part 2 will touch.
Yeah. There's gonna be a part 2. Maybe we'll hit it.
And we hit a lot of the tougher questions this time around. Next time we're gonna shoot for more of the funnier and the
like practical stuff.
Side. Yeah,
and like stories and
dude. And I mean, also
funniest thing. You kind of had a funny story. Funniest thing. Top 5 things. Stuff like that.
I could fill half the episode with the dumb things I've done as a teacher. That kids are like, Miss Fisher, that's actually wrong.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, so we'll do a part 2 because I mean,
definitely.
We'll talk about that off the air. All right, so gonna sign off. First of all, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tina, for coming on once again. For you, you still owe us hot wings. It's gonna happen at some point.
Tina, nice to meet you.
It was nice to meet you too. This was a great discussion.
Absolutely, I agree. I was just texting Drew a little bit ago. I'm like, I love this format. Yeah. I really like interviewing people and learning the ins and outs.
I love getting to learning the ins and outs, and like I said at the very beginning of the episode, I love learning new things about different people and different people's perspectives, and I think that goes right hand in hand with teaching, because a lot of people, they need to know that it's okay to have different opinions. Kind of how we were talking with voting and doing stuff like that. It's okay to have different opinions and still be friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Hey, so next week, July 31st, gonna go back to sports for a little bit. Start off the episode with I think we'll see what happens in the next 7 days, but the Jordan Love, the Tua Tagovailoa, the Dak Prescotts, we're here at mini camps, mandatory training camps.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of holdouts. We've got guys that could be holding out that aren't. We've got guys that shouldn't be that are. So next week, going to be hitting sports again. And also going to end the episode. We'll be joined by Coach Brian Haddad. He does a lot of stuff here.
Wrestling stuff.
We'll talk a little wrestling next week. SummerSlam's next weekend, but also John Cena recently announced his retirement, but he's going to do a full schedule year next year. So, like, as wrestling fans, like, John Cena is the guy that saved wrestling, essentially, for over 20 years. And next year is going to be his last year. So I kind of want to go through with Coach Brian Haddad and fantasy book some of the stuff for Cena's last year. So I think that'll end next week's episode. First half of it, though, some NFL talk, because we've got some contract situations to go over, because they're interesting out there right now. They're
even with our own teams.
Yeah, no, for sure. Kamara and Tua, and it's crazy. So
Kyle, I have to throw you a little bit of a wrench at the end there with your sport preview. I got to give a shout out to my daughter, and she would agree with me that Caitlin Clark is the best and most exciting athlete in the last 10 years, and I'm gonna fire some shots with you personally and say that LeBron James is one of the most overrated athletes in sports history.
And with that, we will see you next week.
Remember, without LeBron's revenue, without the revenue that LeBron has bought the NBA.
No, LeBrevenue. That was fantastic.
LeBrevenue is awesome.
That's great.
Without the revenue that LeBron has brought the NBA,
Caitlin
remember
Clark.
that the only reason that the WNBA is even still afloat is because the NBA keeps it afloat. So without LeBron,
they just signed a $4.4 billion dollar. But billions and billions.
No, Drew Gorman. What a guy. All right, guys. We will see you next week. Thanks for if you stuck this long on a pre-recorded, thank you so much. We'll see you next week on Leave It at the Table.
Appreciate it.